We'll move now to item number 2, AB 1102 by Assemblymember Allen. Good morning.
Good morning.
Assemblymember. Right, music sounds good this morning, Ted. I like that. That's.
I need to tell my wife I love her. It's Joe Carcher from Huntington Beach.
Is that what that means?
Yeah.
That is. We should use that one. I like it. We do have a busy morning, so we will. For those in the audience, we'll have members kind of going in and out, and some may not be here for the entire testimony, and we will hold the roll open for them when they return from their committee assignments elsewhere. So, Assemblymember Allen.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. Let me start by saying that I'll be accepting the amendments as our staff discussed. However, the suggestions to remove the findings and declarations doesn't strike me as being as necessary as the proposed statutory changes, as those statements were necessary inclusions by Ledge Council when the bill was drafted in coordination with Chairman Chesbrough and his committee staff in the Assembly. So I'd prefer that we do not strike the innocuous findings from the bill.
I hear what you're saying, and thank you. We will discuss that. So you're accepting the other? I don't know either, but that's what we'll.
I mean, I know it's a definition.
In terms of the
What
bill.
part of the bill are we talking about?
Yeah, and perhaps you'd like to clarify that?
Absolutely. These were the findings that were put in by Ledge Council into the bill. They weren't. Ms. Christie, if you'd like to talk about findings real quick.
I believe the author is referring to sections 3 and 4 of the bill that relate to the declaration that this is a special law that's required as a charter city, and that this is an issue of statewide concern and not a municipal affair.
Mr. Chair, if I may, if this is, and my understanding was Ledge Council did insist upon them, is there anyone here from Ledge Council who can explain why they feel that these need to be included, since that's the subject of part of the contention in the measure? I'd like to know why they feel that these are required, and
Of course, they were inserted in the bill in its original form.
No, I understand. I understand.
To that, so it may not be appropriate today, but if we could maybe find some interpretation of that from someone,
I'm not that.
We'll have time this morning to see if we can get that answer.
I just think that's going to be helpful to find out whether or not this is something that's, if they're innocuous, or if they're not innocuous, if the law requires them. I mean, they were, as I understand, put in by Ledge Council. Nobody has any particular preference, so that we're dealing with what Ledge Council feels is appropriate. It sure makes sense to find out why. I mean, that's sort of an agnostic position. I'm interested in why Ledge Council feels that they should be in there if it's a bone of contention in the bill.
Mr. Chairman, I may be able to throw some light on that. I am not Ledge Council, and I am a lawyer, and I'm representing Friends of the Fire Rings here. But one of the provisions relates to the fact that this only applies to the South Coast District, so it needs to be a special law. If it applied statewide, we'd be taking on other air districts, and there's no indication that any other air district is going to be adopting fire ring regulations. So we just wanted to keep the bill narrow. And the second one relates to, for charter cities, a matter has to be of statewide concern for the legislature to regulate anything within their boundaries. And so it's just a declaration. The Coastal Act applies to charter cities because it is clearly a matter of statewide concern. We wanted to be sure this was in under that same umbrella. So,
I think because the bill applies to the state rather than just the specific area and fire rings that we're talking about.
The bill currently applies to just South Coast, but the question
Right,
is, should
and
it
this is,
apply?
the bill currently applies to just South Coast. We're trying to broaden it to kind of a state overriding policy of that, and that's where the findings would be different. And that's the reason. But we can try and get some more information if you'd like, Senator Jackson.
And I look forward to working, with the committee too, like as the bill moves forward.
Would you like to continue?
I would love to, absolutely, yeah. AB 1102 is necessary to provide or to safeguard environmental considerations, legitimate health concerns, and to protect access to the state's beautiful public beaches without bypassing the appropriate agencies with jurisdiction over each of these issues. The bill is a result of feedback from thousands of Californians, the hard work of Ledge Council, committee consultants on multiple committees, and the unanimous bipartisan support of my colleagues in the Assembly. For those who are not maybe familiar with the fire rings, they've been an iconic part of California and Southern California beaches for over 60 years. They're an inexpensive and irreplaceable activity for Californians from all over the state, especially those who can't afford multi-million-dollar beachfront homes. As a Southern California native, I grew up enjoying long summer days on the beach. These were typically ended by a beach bonfire and a sunset, and this was family and friends and s'mores and a good time. The history that has led us up to this point is united Californians, regardless of political, socioeconomic, or cultural background, from all across state to rally to defend against this very real threat. AB 1102 has a broad coalition of support. It includes Surfrider Foundation, local counties and cities, Coast Walk California, the NAACP, LULAC, local chambers of commerce, and many, many more. Further, there's also an overwhelming bipartisan support, which includes joint author Assemblywoman Sharon Quirk-Silva, principal co-author Senator Lou Correa, and co-author Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez. So in closing, by harmonizing these laws, we're ensuring that all stakeholders involved in the process are brought to the table when there are potential impacts to our iconic pastime of a California beach bonfire. So in closing, I'd like to thank the chair and the committee staff for working with me to draft language that will achieve a positive resolution for all sides involved and that will protect our beach bonfires for generations to come.
Thank you, Senator Allen. Senator Jackson, we're looking related to the issue of declarations and the findings that we're talking about in the bill on page 4 of the bill, where it talks about that the legislature, and this is one of the findings, the legislature hereby declares that it is the state's preference to avoid the net loss of beach fire rings within a city's jurisdiction. That's one of the concerns that we have, whether that's an appropriate action for us. And then as it moves down, that the use of fire rings of public coastal areas is a matter of statewide concern and not a municipal affair. Those are the issues I think that we're concerned with in the bill.
So in other words, they're not innocuous, because in order for us to have jurisdiction, they need to establish that we are looking at a statewide policy, even though at this point in time, the impact is specifically limited to what's going on in a small community. Is that basically it?
Yes.
For us to have that jurisdiction, we have to make that statement that we care about fire rings on a statewide basis, even though the application of this measure addresses what's happening in only one district.
Yes,
Is that accurate?
That is, and that came from the resolution that we passed last year, both houses basically supporting beach bonfires.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Very good. Thank you. Very good. Witnesses in support. Ms. Christie, good morning.
Good morning, Chair and members. I'm Sarah Christie, the Legislative Director of the California Coastal Commission. The Coastal Commission supports AB 1102 because it clarifies a potential misunderstanding about the process for complying with the South Coast Air Quality Management District's new regs on beach fire rings in Southern California. In practical terms, what this means is that the City of Newport Beach must comply with the public access policies of the Coastal Act as it moves forward to implement the requirements of Rule 444. And this is important because while there are a number of ways to comply with the rule, not all of them are consistent with the Coastal Act. And AB 1102 makes explicit what the Commission has been advising all along. excuse me, that the city must apply for a permit before removing or restricting use of the fire rings, and the application must analyze all potential alternatives. Because Newport does not have a certified LCP, the Commission still has all coastal permitting jurisdiction in this area, so the issue is clearly within our jurisdiction. The simplest way to comply with Rule 444 is simply to spread the fire rings further apart so they meet the spacing requirements of the rule. This would allow the continued use of firewood as fuel while retaining the current number of rings, meeting the air quality standards as well as Coastal Act requirements. The Commission has offered to expedite permitting through an administrative permit or waiver for this approach and could have done so prior to the rule taking effect. But there may be other solutions as well, such as a combination of charcoal-only rings, clean-burning fire fuels, and spacing alternatives. AB 1102 provides unambiguous direction to the city that they can't choose to comply with the Air District but ignore the Coastal Act. Opponents to this bill say that the public health is more important than public access. They've said that air quality trumps coastal protection and therefore Rule 444 should rule. However, California Supreme Court has repeatedly held that where two statutes overlap and the legislature has not expressly indicated that one supersedes or repeals the other, courts should strive to give effect to all provisions of both statutes. Implied repeal can only be found if there's no way to rationally harmonize the two statutes, and clearly that's not the case here. The explicit provisions of Rule 444 can easily be met in a manner that's also completely consistent with Coastal Act public access policies. That's a win-win by any measure. If you can protect air quality and public health while still providing full public access, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you do that? The Commission doesn't question the AQMD's authority to regulate smoke from bonfires, and AB 1102 does not undermine that authority. The bill addresses the process for local government compliance with that authority to ensure that air quality regulations are not being inappropriately used as justification for privatizing public space. The Coastal Commission is not dismissive of air quality. We appreciate and support the good work of the AQMD to improve air quality in this state. The Commission is not access uber alles. We understand the importance of property rights and public safety. The committee can be assured that when we get a permit application for this matter, we will work with the city and look at it holistically, taking the AQMD's role into account and considering all public input to inform our actions. Thank you very much. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Christie. Other witnesses in support?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. My name is Joe Carcio. I'm a former mayor of Huntington Beach and presently a city council member. I'm here to request the yea vote on 1102, excuse me. Because fire pits in Huntington Beach are in danger of being altered or eliminated. Fire pits are critical to our community, and they are an integral part of our community's beach culture, landscape, and outdoor recreational experience. These round-shaped, family-friendly symbols of getting together and celebration have been an institution for over 60 years locally. Fire pits are an affordable setting for everyone to sit under the stars and enjoy our beautiful beaches and the surrounding environment. Now these pits are in danger of being compromised or eliminated. This seasonal form of outdoor recreation is a binding force at all levels and for all ages in our community, as well as all the surrounding communities. Losing these fire pits would also be devastating to our state parks and RV camping sites. For the city of Huntington Beach and its 11 million visitors, the loss or modification of these fire pits would cost the city more than $1 million in revenue each year. There is no doubt in my mind that the benefits far outweigh the disadvantages. And with all due respect to the dedicated work of the AQMD and what it does, keeping or removing fire pits should be left up to each city to decide what is best for their own city. Any compromise is totally out of the question. I am here to let you know, the members, that we will not sit idly by. We need your support to save our fire pits that have provided enjoyment over the past 60 years, and we all have a voice, and ours will be heard loud and clear. Keep your mitts off of our pits, and we'll see you all at the beach. Thanks.
Thank you. Next witness in support, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Julia Lester, and I am a partner at Environ International, which is a privately held environmental consultancy. After earning my doctorate in chemical engineering from Caltech, I joined the South Coast AQMD back in 1990. And during my 14 years there, I developed several first-in-the-nation particulate matter plans and rules as the lead of the particulate matter strategy section. As a consultant, I have assisted the Imperial County Air Pollution Control District in their development of best available control measure regulations and their PM10 state implementation plan. I'm here today to testify in support of AB 1102. AB 1102 makes explicit the harmony that should exist between AQMD Rule 444, beach fire ring provisions, and the Coastal Act. Ensuring harmony with other regulatory programs and regulation is a key component in air district rule development. In my experience, rulemaking typically occurred over 12 to 18 months. Staff did extensive outreach to other agencies. For example, a proposed air quality rule could include 5 different ways to achieve compliance, but it may turn out after discussion with other agencies that, say, water regulators, that 2 of those ways may be prohibited by a water quality agency, and 2 others may also need to conform to the water quality regulations as well as the air quality ones. Thus, the air quality rule would list 3 compliance options and note that 2 would require compliance with water quality rules. In the case of Rule 444, the rulemaking schedule was very abbreviated, less than 4 months long. To their credit, AQMD staff recognized concerns by the Coastal Commission staff and others concerning the total ban on wood burning in fire rings. With the data that showed no exceedances of adopted health standards, they crafted compliance options, such as locating fire rings more than 700 feet from residences or spacing fire rings further than 100 feet apart. So regardless of the reasons for the shortened rule development schedule, it did limit the time the AQMD and the Coastal Commission staff could explicitly identify some of the Coastal Act requirements that would be necessary in addition to complying with Rule 444 provisions. Well, AB 1102 ensures that Rule 44 compliance is consistent with the Coastal Act requirements and vice versa. Now, you may hear that I have raised scientific and technical concerns about the Rule 444 beach fire ring provisions, and that is true. Questioning data and inferences is what scientists must do. But AB 1102 does not question Rule 444 or any of its provisions. It accepts it as an adopted South Coast AQMD rule that must be complied with. My technical review has shown that there are viable compliance options for local jurisdictions or government agencies to meet Rule 444 requirements and comply with the Coastal Act requirements. AB 1102 explicitly charges those jurisdictions to comply fully with both sets of requirements. This is why I urge your support and yes vote on AB 1102. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lester. I have a question. You're an environmental consultant. Are you here on your own behalf, or are you? Do you have a contract with someone? Are you being paid by someone?
I am. I am a consultant for the Friends of the Fire Rings.
Friends of the Fire Rings. Very good. Thank you, Ms. Lester. Other witnesses in support?
Ed Behrens on behalf of the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors in support of the bill.
Thank you very much.
Holly Fermini on behalf of the Orange County Board of Supervisors. This is a countywide concern for us because, as we all know, perception is everything, and that even the change of use that may be perceived by our residents who live in other parts of the county that do not have the privilege of living on the coast can be received as, deterring them from coming for a very affordable access to recreation. So we urge your aye vote of this bill.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Monica Brogdon. I am here on behalf of the California State Conference of the NAACP. I am a Los Angeles resident, and I'm also a regular user of the beaches and the fire rings in the Los Angeles area. And I'm here asking for your support for AB 1102. And AB 1102 carries out the California Constitution's protection of the civil right to coastal access for recreational opportunities to be provided for all the people. Further, AB 1102 protects the right of lower cost recreational opportunities and protects recreational facilities. We believe that the use of the beach fire ring is an important public recreational activity that should not be removed or restricted without review and a compelling state interest. The use of fire rings at public coastal areas is a matter of statewide concern and not a municipal affair. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony and welcome.
Thank you.
Morning, Chair and members. Teresa Cook on behalf of the California Travel Association and strong support.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Cook. Appreciate it. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. My name is Warner Chabot. I represent a coalition of environmental, social justice, and Southern California civic groups that strongly support this bill. Those groups include the Surfrider Foundation, the California Coastal Protection Network, Azul, the Banning Ranch Conservancy, Still Protecting Our Newport, Friends of Harbors and Beach Parks, and North County Watch. We recognize that our beaches provide one of the major sources of free public recreation for California's working class and low-income families, and that access to that resource must be carefully protected. We believe that this bill provides a fair and thoughtful balance to address the legitimate concerns of both advocates of social justice and beach access, as well as advocates for health and air quality concerns through the implementation of Rule 444. Both groups of advocates in this debate have significant and legitimate concerns that should be respected and fully assessed. We believe that AB 1102, with the proposed amendments made yesterday, will achieve this goal. In short, we do believe it is a win-win situation. Our understanding is that the amendments agreed to in concept yesterday will further add to this win-win aspects of 1102, and we support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other witnesses in support? See no one. Witnesses. Sorry, do you have a question? Oh. Witnesses in opposition, please. What? Oh, I do that a lot lately too. Good morning, Mr. Wallerstein. How are you, Doctor?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. I'm Dr. Barry Wallerstein. I serve as the executive officer of the South Coast Air Quality Management District. I've had that role for 17 years. I am here today on behalf of our governing board to express the board's opposition to AB 1102 in its current form. We do, however, want to thank the chair and the committee staff and the members of the committee for the proposed amendments that you've been hearing about. We do believe that they address some of our concerns. The findings that were discussed a few moments ago, we believe, are actually problematic. I have my counsel here that can talk in more detail about that. So we would ask you to go with the committee recommendations.
Are these the amendments that were
Talking
taken?
about the findings.
They're problematic for you.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I have a question about that. I was just discussing that with my staff because the reference was made to a finding that let's see,
And it's very good. Senator Jackson, thanks for raising that.
Okay,
Now,
so
no. I think it's a good. It's an appropriate time, and Dr. Wallerstein can continue. Second, and his counsel is here, so we can perhaps get some clarification from his position and perspective on it as well.
I guess the question then is there is a statement on page 4, lines, starting with subdivision B, line 14, and the last sentence says, the legislature hereby declares that it is the state's preference to avoid the net loss of beach fire rings within a city jurisdiction. And I guess my question is that I don't believe that that is a finding. That's within the bill itself. So I'm just seeking clarification. Is that correct? That's within the bill itself. So that's not subject to the findings issue that we're talking about. So that's, are you also, may I inquire through the chair?
Yes, of course.
Since it was raised, so I thought. But this is one of my questions was, there is within the substance of the context of the bill, the statement the legislature hereby declares it's the state's preference to avoid the net loss of beach fire rings within the city's jurisdiction. That is not one of the earlier provisions that we were talking about, that's within, it's not a finding, that's within the substance of the bill itself. Are you objecting to that? Is that?
Go ahead.
I'm just looking for some
Yes,
clarity about what we're arguing about here.
And I don't know whether the acceptance of the amendments includes deleting that language or not, but if it does not, that would be an issue for us because it would express the legislature's policy intent. I don't believe this was put in at the request of Ledge Council. It's clearly a policy intent that would affect how a city would comply with the district's rules. But we also do object to the statewide concern issue, and I'll talk about that when we have the appropriate moment.
Okay, I think that clarifies for me.
Very, thank you, Senator Jackson.
Okay.
Doctor?
AB 1102, in our view, preempts District Rule 444, a local measure designed to better protect public health while preserving the ability to enjoy fire rings on Southland beaches. The bill, as we're saying, overturns our local district rule development process, which was based on sound science, health protection, and extensive public input. And I want to emphasize there was extensive public input on this item. Everyone knew about it. Everyone participated, including the Coastal Commission. On the science side, if the committee wants to hear in detail, we're prepared to go through that. But let me say our lead person is also a Caltech PhD. His dissertation pertains to wood burning. We had scores of scientists working on this matter. We looked at it half dozen or more different ways.
And I appreciate that. I think that the committee clearly understands that there is a health risk to particulate matter, especially 2.5 and 10.
Okay.
I don't think there's much discussion or discrepancy in our thinking on that.
So, Mr. Chairman, then let's turn to what's happening in the real world. Our regulation took effect March 1st. There's been no net loss of fire rings. Causes us to ask us why we're here. As you've been hearing, the regulation establishes buffer zones, minimum spacing requirements between fire rings. In addition, the rule allows a number of other options, including natural gas, propane, or charcoal if a fire ring is in close proximity to a residence. Thus, our flexible approach really does have numerous options that allows the continuous use and enjoyment of fire rings. There is no loss of access. And at the same time, we're meeting our objective of reducing exposure to harmful wood smoke. Since our rule went into effect, beachgoers are still enjoying the fire rings and the beach experience. I want to repeat, to date, to our knowledge, not a single one of the 765 fire rings have been removed from Southland beaches. In addition, Rule 444 allows for wood to be burned in all fire pits as long as they meet the spacing requirements. As you've been hearing, the City of Newport Beach, however, elected to comply with our regulation through requiring the use of charcoal through an adopted ordinance as an interim measure while they explore other compliance options. All of the City of Newport Beach's fire pits remain available to the public in the same locations that existed prior to Rule 444, and other beaches have complied by appropriately spacing their fire rings. We understand that the City of Newport Beach is still in the early stages of implementing its charcoal-only ordinance, and more education and experience is needed. Nonetheless, it's very important to report, and it's in your materials from the city itself, that the transition really has been going smoothly and the amenity has been maintained for the public's enjoyment. Senator Pavley asked me to inquire whether they're seeing the same level of crowds on the beaches. I contacted the city manager. The feedback that we got was, yes, they're seeing the same crowds. I said, can we quantify this some way? How's the parking revenue for Corona Beach? And so they looked at parking revenue for March, April, and May, compared this year to last year, and the revenue is up 17%. I'm not telling you that's all because they have charcoal in the fire rings. Weather has a lot to do with that. But the point is, their observations, my personal observation going to the Newport Beach twice this last weekend, is the fire rings are in full use. The beaches are crowded. Our rule hasn't affected the access to the beach. So our bottom line is there's adequate flexibility in the current law to ensure protection of public health and to have the public have access to beach fire pits. It appears to us that the main dispute at this time concerning the fire rings is really between the Coastal Commission and the City of Newport Beach, yet I find myself before this committee today facing a bill. We believe that the bill is inappropriate because it could delay or alter our public health protection measure, Rule 444. And I believe it strips authority of our agency to protect the public from air pollution, when this matter could simply be resolved between the Coastal Commission and the City of Newport Beach without legislation in a way that ensures compliance with air pollution law and the Coastal Act. We also believe that 1102 in its current form sets a bad precedent that will encourage other similar efforts to ask this legislature to overturn local decisions which have been based on full public process. Therefore, on behalf of the governing board of the South Coast Air Quality Management District, we respectfully request your no vote on AB 1102. And if it's okay with the chair, we'd like to have our council just make a few brief comments.
Of course.
And I also would like to pass this out. Assemblyman Allen, this is one for you. These are photographs from this last weekend of different beaches. You'll see photographs from Newport Beach. It's all charcoal-only photographs. And you'll see Huntington Beach, which is wood, and Dockweiler, which is wood, and Corona Del Mar, which is in Newport Beach and charcoal. People are having a good time. There's not a problem here. This does not merit legislation.
I think for those from Northern California here, we should have had a field trip would have been in order last weekend.
Where's the fog?
Where's the fog?
Where's
Yeah.
the fog?
All I see is sunshine. Something's wrong here. Thank you, Dr. Wallerstein. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Hill and committee members. I previously mentioned that the discussion of the legislative preference not to lose any fire pits, I don't think that's a legal requirement. That's a policy preference. As far as being a special law because it only applies to the South Coast, if that's the way the law is, then that particular finding would be appropriate. We are concerned with the proposed finding that would make the use of fire rings per se a matter of statewide concern rather than a municipal affair. Now, the attorney representing the Friends of the Fire Ring said that he thought that this language was necessary in order for the bill to even apply to charter cities because it affects their police power. Now, the way the amendments appear to be directed, they would be directing the cities to comply with both the air quality regulation and the coastal regulation. And so I don't believe the finding of a matter of statewide concern is necessary any longer because charter cities are already subject to the Coastal Act and have to comply with it. What it might do, however, is in any dispute between the Coastal Commission and a city as to how the city is going to comply with the Air District rule, it would mean that the Coastal Commission would automatically win because it would be a matter of statewide concern rather than local concern. Now, coastal access under the Coastal Act is already a matter of statewide concern. So if there's a conflict between coastal access and the city's chosen method of compliance, then that's a legitimate battle that the Coastal Commission can get into. But I'm concerned that by saying the mere use of fire rings is a matter of statewide concern would automatically give Coastal Commission the victory regardless of whether it's based on coastal access concerns or not. So I would ask you to check carefully with Ledge Council before leaving that language in there.
Very good. Thank you for that testimony. A question related to that? Senator Jackson?
Yeah, I think that you may have misspoke. I don't think Mr. Naylor was representing himself as the attorneys for the other group, and so I think you
I'm sorry if I misrepresented somebody. I
think he was positing because he was an attorney. We tend to do that a lot as attorneys. We make too many posits.
Okay.
Even when we're not attorneys.
And that's true. So if I get the gist of what you're suggesting, it's that the Coastal Commission really doesn't have the jurisdiction. It has jurisdiction over access, but not over a decision like the number of fire pits and so forth. Is that what you're saying?
Not exactly. I think what I'm saying is that the Coastal Commission has legitimate legitimate jurisdiction over issues relating to coastal access, and to the extent that they can establish that the city's chosen method of compliance actually inappropriately interferes with coastal access, then they might be in a position to tell the city otherwise. But I'm concerned that if we make this the mere use of fire rings per se a matter of statewide concern rather than municipal concern, then the Coastal Commission would be in a position to argue that it would win in any dispute regardless of whether a legitimate threat to public access to the beaches.
What about the notion that it is a change of use? Do they not have jurisdiction on that issue?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in coastal law, but it seems like that the use is burning fire, having bonfires, which we have. This is
no. I know. I'm just trying to hone down to what, because I think what the Coastal Commission says is they have jurisdiction because of the change of use. Charcoal from wood. We don't have to get into. I'm just looking for the jurisdictional basis upon which.
I think that's exactly the issue.
That's okay. So if charcoal, wood to charcoal is a change of use, is that within their jurisdiction, the whole change? You, as I hear you, you're talking about the Coastal Commission's jurisdiction is over access. My understanding is they're also saying that their jurisdiction is over a change of use of it. And I'm just trying to figure out, irrespective of whether...
I think that's correct, but we don't necessarily agree that this is a change of use.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Senator Jackson. Other witnesses in opposition?
Yes. Mr. Chair, I'm members Bonnie Holmes-Jen with the American Lung Association in California. And as a health organization, we would be concerned about any legislation that undermines safeguards to protect community health from smoke pollution. And that's what we believe that this bill does. It reduces important air district authority over a dangerous source of pollution. I appreciate you underscoring your concern about smoke pollution and the committee's understanding that this wood smoke does have dangerous levels of particles that contribute to lung disease, heart disease, premature death, and we're especially concerned about vulnerable populations. Children, the elderly, those already with lung and heart illnesses that live in close proximity to these fire rings or are exposed directly nearby. From our perspective, we believe that the South Coast Air District has been very reasonable. We would agree they did have an extensive public process. Every view was heard, and the district did respond to local concerns in the revisions to the regulation. As you've heard, alternatives are available and being used. And from our perspective, there's simply no need for this legislation. It undermines important air district authority. There's no need for it. And our recommendation is that the local stakeholders continue discussions, if needed, with the South Coast Air District and with the Coastal Commission, but outside of the legislative process. So we would ask you to hold the bill and not to take action on it. So that's our position. Thank you for hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Holmes-Jen. Appreciate it. Next witness, yes. Senator Lynn.
If I could, please. Are you distributing this, or just part of the opposition is distributing this? That goes with you? Okay.
That's not mine.
All right. In any case, with regard to not only the inconvenience, but the concern for serious health issues related to the carcinogenic aspect of wood smoke, your concern was before the City Council took its action. That's correct?
Well, I mean, our concern is about the exposure to wood smoke from the fire rings.
So with the Air Quality Management District's Rule 444 and their claim that access has not been impacted with the use, along with the use of the charcoal, you have no opposition to that?
We are supportive of the Air District's regulatory approach as they are implementing it, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Senator Lynn. Next witness in opposition, please.
Good morning. I'm Ralph DeLibero. I'm a physician working in the community with decades of experience in healthcare and quality review research. I was an associate professor at the University of Southern California. I've published 4 books on healthcare delivery and reform. I'm the past president of the Los Angeles County Medical Association, as well as past chair of its long-standing Air Quality Committee. I appear here before you today as a public health advocate to oppose AB 1102. Now, I understand the uninformed popularity of wood fires blazing in fire rings along our public beaches for heating and supposed low-cost recreation. The real cost, however, is not so low. As early as 1995, studies presented by the Society of Toxicology strongly suggested that exposure to the smoke associated with wood fires is a health hazard. When burning an open wood fire on a beach, you do not produce solely a warm atmosphere. You produce wood smoke, which is particle pollution. You produce soot. Now it is universally and undisputably proven, a proven fact, that this burning of soot particle pollution is directly linked not only to respiratory ailments, but also to heart disease, cancer, strokes, and premature death. Other hazardous pollutants in the wood smoke are benzene, naphthalene, styrene, toluene, xylene. These are all aromatic hydrocarbons. These are carcinogens. They also are very severe irritants to the eyes, nose, and throat. The United States Federal Environmental Pollution Administration estimates that wood smoke is 12 times more carcinogenic than equal amounts of tobacco smoke. And wood smoke residuals remain. That is to say, it stays active in the body 40 times longer than tobacco smoke. Now, both California legislative houses have made great strides in reducing cigarette smoking in public areas. And now is the time to do the same for open wood-burning fires. Reducing air pollution, even by just a small amount, has been directly associated with a decrease in respiratory and cardiovascular diseases. I am sure that as the chair and members of the Senate Environmental Quality Committee, that is you gentlemen and ladies seated here today, I am sure that you would rather support the prolongation of a healthy life rather than condemn your California constituents to both an unhealthy life and an earlier than necessary death. For these factual reasons stated and health concerns here shared, I urge your no vote on AB 1102. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the testimony. Appreciate it, Doctor. Next witness in opposition.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman and Senators. Bill McGavin with Coalition for Clean Air, urging the committee to hold the bill. I think your committee analysis does an excellent and thorough job of laying out what are the issues here. And in particular, I think question 12 is very apt. Is there currently a problem at the local level? And we would say there certainly is not a problem that requires a change in statute. There are some problems up and down the state with enforcing coastal access, and I think those are addressed by the Speaker's enforcement bill. But the problem with this bill it would undermine the authority of a really major public health agency to protect the health of residents and including visitors to the beach. And we don't want to jeopardize the health of people who are visiting the beach. I understand that we all grew up with an idea that wood smoke was innocuous, to use the word of the day, but we've since learned otherwise, that the particulates in wood smoke are actually very hazardous to our health. And it reminds me of the debate that happened almost a generation ago over banning cigarette smoking in bars and restaurants, when we were told that nobody would go to restaurants and bars anymore if they couldn't smoke there. And instead we found out that people still go to bars and restaurants, they just are able to come home with their lungs a lot cleaner. And I think the same is true here. People will still be going to the beach, it appears they still are, but they'll be healthier when they leave. So we urge you to hold the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGavern.
Mr. Chairman and members, excuse me, Brendan Tuig on behalf of the California Air Pollution Control Officers Association. That's an association of the executive officers of all 35 local air districts. Dr. Wallerstein referred to the rule adoption process, and others witnesses did as well. And we're deeply concerned with the precedent that this sets. We think that it will undermine our future rule adoption process for other districts. So this isn't just an isolated issue to us. We think it'll undermine that process by encouraging others who aren't 100% satisfied with what has with the rules that have been adopted at the local level by boards, air district boards that are predominantly comprised of local elected officials, to then come to the legislature with their concerns. And we find that to be problematic. We find it'll make it harder for us to protect public health and carry out what the districts are charged with, which is improving air quality and protecting public health. So while we appreciate your work, Mr. Chairman, we do have these overarching concerns about precedent. So we urge you to oppose the bill.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Andy Katz, representing Breathe California, and for the reasons stated by the previous speakers, we're in opposition to the bill. For the 10% of the general population with asthma, this is wood smoke on the beach can be more than an inconvenience. It can mean a sharp pain every time you try to breathe. It can mean a trigger to an asthma attack. And for that reason, this is an access issue for people with reduced lung function, including chronic disease like asthma. We note that the staff's recommendations for amendments are helpful to the most problematic portions of the bill, the ones that cause preemption, the ones that would override the air district's rule, notwithstanding any other portion of the law. However, the findings could mean that this problem, which is really a local problem, could get thrown into litigation, and that we would have a further delay to the solutions to the problem. So it's hard to say that with the resulting bill that would say two statutory schemes should continue to coexist, that the findings end up tipping the balance. So we would strongly recommend holding the bill, and we urge a no vote.
Thank you, Mr. Katz. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. My name is Charles Farrell. I'm a 14-year resident of the Balboa Peninsula. I live by the Balboa Pier in Newport Beach, directly in front of 15 fire pits, with an additional 18 fire pits that burn on the other side of the pier as well. That's a total of 33 fire pits that impact my neighborhood. Newport Beach is a neighborhood full of people just like yours. The recreational leagues play their tournaments in front of my house, sadly, right next to the fire pits. It's a place where toddlers, children, teenagers, adults recreate, play frisbee, flag football, soccer, fish, get a tan, picnic, and have a nice barbecue today. We've built a huge parking lots, piers, restaurants, ferry boats, and Ferris wheels, boardwalks, and have even extended the 55 freeway to accommodate and entertain the huge volume of daily visitors. And we want you to come visit us in Newport Beach. However, with what we know today about the dangers of wood smoke and the many other legal and illegal substances being burned by the public and impossible to enforce, the city of Newport Beach, my city, had to act, and they did. Today, Orange County is the 14th most densely populated county in the United States of America, per Wikipedia. On the Balboa Peninsula, our homes are commonly distinguished with fractional addresses such as 214 and a half or 214 and a third, as my residence is. There are a lot of children who live and play in our neighborhood, on the green, in the sand, and in the alleys. They inhale Class 1 carcinogens as the fire pits burn just feet away. The air is often contaminated, about 3 football fields to each side of the pier, air filled with heavy doses of particulate matter, of wood smoke, and plastics. By the way, I'm a renter. Most of my neighbors are renters. I am offended by anyone who suggests that this is a fight between rich homeowners and the public. That is not true. Most of my neighbors are renters. Our neighborhood is under siege. We are not able to escape the stench. We cannot wear gas masks as we eat and sleep with a house that is filled with trapped soot pushed by the prevailing winds. We are forced essentially to breathe contaminated air up to 24 hours a day, week after week, month after month, year after year. Mind you, I've been there for 14 years breathing this. So I'm here for one reason only, and I'm concerned about my health. The AQMD says that 15 fire pits in front of my unit, my rental unit, should be 700 feet away. In my neighborhood, they are less than half that distance from the homes. Our beach fire pits are just too close to civilization. We are no longer a county where people come from LA to burn when there's nobody around. We are very populated, and we need every one of your up there help to stop what's going on the beach, this burning on the beach. We don't want to die, and that's why I flew up here from Orange County this morning, a horrible death breathing these chemicals. Please give Newport Beach and other conscientious cities the option to decide what can and cannot be burned at the beach. Today, wood burning to a vast majority of beachgoers is a non-issue. The ban has been in place for almost 3 months, and it's been widely accepted. The city of Newport Beach has handled it extremely well. Those who want to burn have adapted, and most people are very happy on the beach if you talk to them to go green. The parking lots are full by mid-morning, packed. I'm right in front of the fire. I see the rings right outside my door, the rings and the recreational people and the parking lots right outside my home. They're full by 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. The boardwalks and restaurants are very busy, and more people than ever are enjoying our beaches. This is not an access issue, not at all. And it's not about rich people. Cleaner wood smoke-free air. It has been a huge difference. Just burning that charcoal has made a huge difference. It has turned out to be a really, really good thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming this morning. Appreciate you traveling to make your testimony. Thank you.
I didn't have a cigarette this morning when I passed through thousands of people at the airport, got on the airplane, got off in Sacramento. Not one person after passing thousands of people was there did I even see someone smoking a cigarette. So people will adapt. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Barbara Peters, and I live in Corona del Mar, about 520 feet away from 27 beach fire rings. I oppose this legislation because my health and the health of my family are very important to me, and I feel like they're on the line. We didn't know how bad wood smoke was for our health until just a few years ago. The smoke would often drift into our home from the fire rings, and it got to the point where my mother-in-law couldn't visit us because the smoke triggered her asthma. We learned a lot since then about the adverse health risks of wood smoke exposure, especially for nearby residents. Some of our neighbors have cancers that correlate to breathing wood smoke. You have a photographic handout that has on it the words of my neighbors who couldn't be here today. These are people who live where the smoke exceeds public health guidelines, and they each sent an email or a letter to this committee describing their concerns. Now, thanks to the AQMD regulation, we have some relief from the smoke. All of the fire rings in Newport Beach remain in full use with a cleaner burning fuel, and it's as busy as ever. Charcoal burns with a surprisingly nice flame, and we see people enjoying the warmth and cooking food, all without the harmful smoke. The local solution is working, and the air at the beach is safer for everyone. Why is this even still an issue? If anything, the beach is more accessible now because people with lung disease or heart disease, pregnant women, Small children, young and old, can safely go. You have an opportunity to stop this bill today, to send a message that air quality really matters, and to promote the use of cleaner burning fuels. Please place our health above recreational wood burning. Please oppose this harmful and needless legislation. Please vote no on AB 1102. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Peters. Appreciate you being here this morning. Good morning.
Hi, my
Peters.
name is Frank Peters. I'm a resident of Corona Del Mar. And years ago, when I moved to the beach, the fire pits weren't a concern. But over time, as they'd fill the house with smoke, we started looking into just what we are dealing with. And of course, we discovered a nightmare in the making. Wood smoke is so lethal. We jumped into action, and soon we had a unanimous city council decision in favor of removing the health hazard. But then, as you know, the next step would be to the Coastal Commission. And now here we are today. As I reflect back, I cannot think of a single instance when Coastal uttered a word in support of our health concerns. Not once. Thankfully, the AQMD has. The issue, as you know, has become quite political. And at one point at home, I'm chatting with my local Orange County supervisor at a social event. I was surprised when his reaction to our plight was so cavalier. He said, "Just move. If you don't like the situation, just move." Of course, I'd heard that quip from others, right? From other critics. This time, for some reason, I was prepared. I said to him, "I'm still working on the real estate disclosure statement." And maybe the way I said it, he smiled and nodded, acknowledging my point. I choose not to sell my house to some unsuspecting family who, like me, might imagine a wonderful life at the beach for their young kids and overlook the toxic fire pits. I won't have that on my conscience. Am I all that different from you? Would you pack up and slink away, make it someone else's problem? I'm guessing that's not how you conduct yourselves. You are men and women of conscience, as are we. Please vote no on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Ms. Phillips, good morning again.
Good morning. I'm Catherine Phillips with Sierra Club, California. As you can imagine, our organization has a lot of coastal activists, and we have a lot of clean air advocates, and we have a lot of people who care about both issues. So we had a very robust internal conversation about this bill, and ultimately my activist volunteers who set our policy determined that we needed to oppose this bill because the clean air issues are extraordinary. This issue seems like something that could be resolved and seems to be going along the path of being resolved without legislation. We ask that you hold this bill. If you don't hold this bill, we do ask that the author accept and the committee require that the committee staff's recommendations for the amendments all be accepted, including the committee recommendations, the committee staff recommendations on the findings and declarations. We think that some of those findings and declarations are sort of the camel's nose under the tent for restricting the ability of regulatory agencies to contain air pollution. We don't think it necessarily has anything to do with the coastal issue. So we would like you to, if this bill does go forward, to make sure that the staff's recommendations on all the amendments, but including the findings, are included.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. Other witnesses in opposition? Seeing no one, Senator Jackson. And then Senator Gaines wanted to ask someone for a question. And then, Senator Pavlik.
I've met with both sides on this, and I find myself usually very much in support of both sides, not necessarily on this issue. So this presents an extraordinary dilemma for me. I'd have to tell you, I hate this bill. I don't hate the author. I hate this bill because I think what it does is it pits very good people, very good causes against each other, and that shouldn't be. That just shouldn't be. I understand the Coastal Commission's concern, and I have some beaches in my neck of the woods, and people love, particularly on the 4th of July, they used to love to create these fire pits without the pits. They just dug and sat there and enjoyed themselves through late afternoon, evening, and I understand the smoke. I couldn't walk through there. I mean, the amount of pollution generated was astonishing. So I understand that point of view. I also understand that the Coastal Commission wants to protect what it believes is its jurisdiction. And so to have both sides fighting with each other now is profoundly disturbing to me. So here's what I'm going to do. I sit on the Natural Resources Committee that Senator Pavley, who sits on this committee, chairs. We've chatted. I think we are in agreement, and she can certainly speak for herself. I will agree to support this bill through this committee. But if both sides do not get together and resolve this issue between them, as I know they can, because they are people of goodwill who are both trying to do the right thing, I will not be jumping on board to save either side on this as we go forward. This is an issue that should be resolved without legislation, and I think when we look at the battle here, I think it demeans each group to be here fighting over this matter. I think that there are pluses on each side and there are minuses on each side. But my goodness, we solved the battle in Northern Ireland. We can solve the problem over fire pits, and we can do it, I think, without legislation. So I respect both groups. I've worked closely with both, and I will continue to do so. But on this issue, there has to be a resolution, and these parties and the wonderful people who are working with them have got to sit down and come up with an answer. And I appreciate your effort. But I think at this point, this is not the kind of effort that we should be doing legislatively, and that people really need to resolve this without legislation.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. Senator Gaines, you had a question, then Senator Pavley.
Yeah, if I could have Julia Lester come back, because I just wanted to hear kind of both sides on this issue of smoke and air quality. And if you could just respond, because we heard a lot of comments, and I'd just like to hear both sides.
Sure.
In terms of the impacts. Thank you.
So it is very clear that particulate matter under 2.5 microns can be very dangerous, has significant health effects, including premature mortality, if it is above the health standards. But wood smoke itself, or any compound actually, your health effect is a function of the toxicity of the compounds that may be in those emissions and the level of exposure. And that's important to remember in this debate. One of the things that has been done is that there was actually a letter that was prepared by Dr. Michael Lipschitz, who is the chief of the Environmental Health Investigations Branch of the California Department of Public Health. And he notes what is known is that when the concerns about wood smoke have arisen out of areas where there's significant amount of wood smoke that causes exceedances of the PM 2.5 standards. Mountain areas, other areas where the predominant emissions are from, say, wood stoves. Also wildfires. I have lived through a number of wildfires down in Southern California, and we are looking at hours and days of wood smoke particulates far in excess of the federal health standards. But the doctor also noticed that there's too little evidence available today to make a judgment about the relative toxicity of wood smoke particles with respect to cardiovascular and cancer outcomes. This talks about the toxicity part. So comparisons when we're talking emissions for cigarettes and wood smoke, we really have to account for the toxicity also, and also the level of exposure. And I think this is where the work that's been done by the Air District has actually been exemplary. For instance, in Orange County, in the winter, wood smoke from fireplaces is actually 9 times greater than all of the emissions from all of the fire rings in Orange County on any given day. And what the Air District has done through its check before you burn. In Northern California, in the Bay Area, they have Spare the Air campaigns, and in the Central Valley, is that if the levels of particulate are getting near federal health standards, where there's areas of concern, they ask people and tell them to restrict wood burning because it adds to the overall level coming in. We warn people to stay indoors during wildfire events when, again, exposure is really high. But the AQMD did its science when it went out during the rule development, and they did monitoring that was really close, actually, to the fire pits, much closer than 700 feet. And what their monitoring shows is that all the levels that they monitored are below the health standards. And so the district, which is the most stringent air district, in my opinion, maybe I'm a little biased having come from there, in the world, frankly, crafted rule provisions that more than adequately address the public health concerns with the spacing requirements that they put into the rule. And I think it's very important to remember that AB 1102, as it's crafted with the amendments that were worked out with the staff, says that Rule 444 must be complied with. No ifs, ands, or buts. Rule 444 must be complied with. And so I believe that that's the context which you have to look at in terms of health concerns.
Great, wonderful. I appreciate it. And I just want to weigh in terms of the access issue. I think this is a big deal for constituents in the region that want to have the ability to go to the beach with their family, have s'mores, and have a fire in a fire pit. And I think we do need to be careful of air quality. It sounds like provisions have been taken so that we will satisfy those commitments, but at the same time preserve a tradition that's gone on for decades. So I'm supportive, and I think maybe additional discussions can occur in the next committee hearing, and we'll see how that all goes as we move forward. But thank you for bringing us.
Thank you, Senator Gaines. And thank you, Lester, for your comments. But I guess what I'd like to do is, Mr. Wallerstein, you had your science, the fellow that developed this rule and the science around it. Perhaps you could have him, as I see, kind of respond to those comments. I just want to make sure that there's equal time.
This is Dr. Philip Fine, who is our Assistant Deputy Executive Officer of Planning and Rulemaking at the agency.
Yeah, and I agree with Dr. Lester. There are federal standards for particulate matter, and they're set at basically an annual standard, an annual average standard, and a 24-hour standard. And it is true in our measurements at the beach, when you average over 24 hours, which includes times when the fires are not burning, we did not exceed that 24-hour standard. But there's a dilemma in the air quality world about what you do when you see shorter-term levels of very elevated particulate matter. So there has been working groups. There was a document produced by a group of people who got together for the fire smoke issue. What do public health agencies do when they see a very, very high level for 1 hour or 3 hours or 4 hours, and they don't even know whether it's going to exceed a standard? And this has been used throughout the country, throughout the state, and it's used up and down the state. So when we see a very high level, the 24-hour standard is 35, and we've seen levels above 200. So when there's a wildfire, we put out monitors, just like we put out near the beach. And when we see a level that high, even 100, 200 micrograms per cubic meter, we tell people, stay indoors, close your windows, don't exercise. Even if we see it for 1 hour, 3 hours, 4 hours. We see those levels near the beach on a consistent basis every night. So why would we tell people throughout the basin to curtail their activities, but not tell the people at the beach the same thing? This is something we're very concerned about. These short-term levels of elevated pollution, it's true, there is no 1 hour health standard, but there is guidance levels that public health agencies use up and down the state and nationwide to be able to mitigate those impacts.
So if I could, Mr. Chairman, I just want to briefly emphasize that the same significance threshold we have used is used by CARB, it's used by US EPA, and it's used by the other air districts to warn people about the health impacts when the particles reach that level. And the measurements we had in the beaches was the highest 1 hour measurements that we've measured other than next to the station fire, which was a horrific horrific forest fire.
And I will add, there is no question that the levels we measured were due to fire pits. We did extensive fingerprinting. We measured it 6 or 7 different ways, and the vast majority of the particulate we're measuring were directly attributable to the fires on the beach. There's no question about that scientifically.
Thank you, Dr. Fine. Thank you, Dr. Washington. Senator Pavley?
Yeah, just a couple of comments and a couple of questions to the author here. Presentations by local residents and South Coast Air Quality Management District officials got my attention, but I wanted to ask you personally, because I'm sort of with Hannah Jackson on this, and we're going to hear this bill twice, whether we, if it passes this committee. I'm questioning my sanity on that. So, if there is no net loss of fire rings, and assuming the facts are correct, there doesn't seem to be any deterrent to public access, and there's still 765 fire rings, but since March, some of them have been switched from wood to charcoal, which is cleaner burning fuel. What's wrong with that? Other than s'mores are better over wood? I mean, that seems that public health trade-off is important to me, because I was a coastal commissioner. I really support public access. I'm also a huge advocate, as you know, on access to clean air. I think the locals have some issue. The process is a whole different problem that I'll just put aside for the minute. So why are we sort of, no pun intending, drawing this line in the sand where people can't work together and figure this out?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I think it's due to some factual inaccuracies that were just presented. There has been no respacing of fire rings, as Dr. Wallerstein presented. If they were to be respaced, these fire rings would be in the water in Newport Beach. That was really what the whole controversy started over, was this would eliminate a lot of fire rings in Orange County. So there has not been spacing of fire rings. And this bill,
if there were, at the end of the day, still the same number of fire rings and they were respaced, that you're fine with that?
Yeah, I mean, if we can preserve, the number of fire rings and the access to those fire rings, that's really the objective here. And that's,
do you care if they're charcoal or wood, personally?
That's not the biggest issue to me. The biggest issue is
I know you need permits. I mean, I know it's more complicated than that.
Thanks, sir.
But one of the issues in the Coastal Commission letter is somehow was the deterrent switching to charcoal. I don't get that, but if that's factually correct or not, I'm trying to figure out what is exactly where some common ground here is on this. Not particularly for this committee, because our challenge here in the Senate is the Assembly sort of had the good fortune in natural resources jurisdiction on air quality and the Coastal Act, but in the Senate, this committee does air quality. Natural resources jurisdiction is the Coastal Act. So we find ourselves actually very concerned about air quality, and that's the purview of this committee. So I need to walk through what is the problem and how could you accomplish your objective. I am not interested in restricting, undermining the authority of either agency, South Coast or the Coastal Commission. So I'd like to hear from you. Where is this?
Super. And I'll also have Sarah Christie, the Coastal Commission, also answer if I could. First is that, if these were to be spaced underneath the original Rule 44 plan, as I mentioned, we'd be losing beach bonfire rings. We have accepted and worked with the committee on amendments, and in this committee and many others, and taken those amendments to say that what this would do is not make Rule 444 null and void, as a lot of the testimony we just heard actually related to. So much of the testimony we just heard was saying, look, we like Rule 44, we want it to stay in place, and this bill would make that null and void. But that's simply not the case. What this bill does is it simply harmonizes the jurisdiction of the Coastal Commission and the AQMD. So I think that, if you balance out what we've heard and realize that many of the statements that were made to a previous version, an unamended version of this bill. And now that we have accepted those amendments, they no longer apply. And because spacing has not occurred, were the spacing to occur, yes, we would be losing access.
But argumentatively, couldn't the fire pits that are relatively close to homes, with whatever the health limit requires, be in charcoal? Isn't there some way to solve this?
And I'll defer to Ms. Christie of the Coastal Commission.
Senator Pavley, your questions perfectly illustrate why this issue needs to be the subject of a fully noticed public hearing before the Coastal Commission for a coastal development permit to implement 444. I think it's important to sort of tone down the rhetoric that we heard in some of the testimony about and talk about what this bill really does. I have to reiterate, this bill does not affect Rule 444 at all. Rule 444 does not ban the burning of wood. If the legislature or the South Coast AQMD wants to ban the burning of wood, then a separate action needs to be taken to address that. But as Rule 444 was written and approved, it does not prohibit the burning of wood. So, as I said earlier, there are a number of ways to implement Rule 444. Some of those ways are consistent with the Coastal Act, and some of those ways are not consistent with the Coastal Act. The city's first response was to eliminate all the fire rings. That's clearly inconsistent with the Coastal Act. Their second response was to propose to eliminate half the fire rings. That's also inconsistent with the Coastal Act. Their current position is to restrict the fuel use to charcoal only. The Coastal Commission has met with the city. We've written to the city. We've been in frequent communication with the city about the fact that this requires a coastal development permit as well.
And I want to raise that question.
Okay.
I don't get that.
Okay.
I just don't get that.
Okay.
Why switching from charcoal to wood or vice versa requires an official permit if it doesn't deter public access, which I think is the jurisdiction of the Coastal Commission. And if it's cleaner air and everyone seems to enjoy it equally, what is the point?
Well, and I'm happy to address that now if you like, or we can discuss that further in the Natural Resources Committee, which you'll be talking about the Public Resources Code section of this bill at your preference.
I'd like a brief reaction to that now.
Happy to do that.
I don't really want to go through this again.
So the benefit of the fire rings specifically is that they are a low-cost, visitor-serving recreational opportunity.
Versus charcoal.
That is how we define the fire rings. They are a low-cost, visitor-serving recreational opportunity, which is a protected activity under the Coastal Act. They predate the Coastal Act, and they are protected by the Chapter 3 policies of the Coastal Act pertaining to public access and low-cost, visitor-serving recreation. The charcoal-only requirement that the city has passed changes the dynamic of that, in that in order to have a bonfire of any size in those fire rings, which are fairly large, I think they're about 3.5 to 4 feet across, you need a very large amount of charcoal. So when you buy a bag of charcoal at the store to cook or grill at home, you might use half the bag. But in order to build a bonfire of any size, you need to have several bags, and that gets quite expensive. The second aspect of that is that we've actually done some side-by-side tests of wood versus fire, and we've taken very specific notes about the length of burn, the amount of heat, and the size of the flame. And clearly, a charcoal fire is not equivalent
to a wood bonfire. So from a cooking perspective, if you're cooking s'mores or, grilling steaks, charcoal works fine. But for a recreational experience, from a recreational perspective, which is what these fire rings provide, charcoal is a diminished experience. Now, that's not to say that there's not a place for some charcoal-only rings on the beach. There are people who you've heard are sensitive to wood smoke. It might make sense to have the fire rings that are closest to the homes be charcoal only. But the only way we're going to have an opportunity to look at this question holistically and talk about where does it make sense to have charcoal fire rings, where does it make sense to have wood fire rings, and where does it make sense to have a pilot project that looks at other clean-burning fuels. The only way to have that kind of comprehensive, holistic discussion that includes the public is through the Coastal Commission's CDP application process.
Okay. Well, we're here today, and we may be in another hearing in a little bit. That hearing process isn't about to occur. We're here because there's legislation, and there will, this will be resolved maybe legislatively, and I don't think that's your best answer.
This legislation will ensure that CDP application process before the Coastal Commission will occur, because it hasn't occurred yet. Despite our multiple efforts to make that happen, it hasn't happened. This bill will provide the explicit direction that needs to take place, and that, quite frankly, is value added at this point.
Well, sort of the overall sort of ongoing issues, we're a lot more sophisticated and knowledgeable about smoke and how it impacts public health. Just traditionally, because something's always been done, doesn't mean we should always continue it if there's information that makes that relevant. So close proximity to homes is relevant, and I think there needs to be some acknowledgement of that. So we're in the EQ committee, and so that's what this is about. In the meantime, I've said to both Mr. Wallerstein, and I've said it to you, Ms. Christie, we just shouldn't be up here in this role picking between different agencies. It seems sort of a little bit convoluted to me. I understand process that we can't figure out impacts to public health if they're real, and no one's challenging AQMD on that they don't have jurisdiction or expertise on health impacts. I think that's relevant.
Thank you, Senator Pavley. Senator Jackson?
Quick question. Could we have Mr. Wallerstein come back here? I have one question that could hopefully resolve this whole thing.
As someone with asthma.
And the question is there any reason why you would not agree to sit down with the Coastal Commission and set up a time to have a hearing on this issue? Because it sounds like there's a lot of merit to your position. And if we could get you have a hearing, that's what I think you want. You want to be able to I don't think, from what I heard, although maybe I'm wrong because we had a disagreement about exposure to wood and what it means, I think it has a significant impact. I don't think people should have to breathe that stuff with the health hazards associated with it. That being said, is there any reason that you could not notice a public hearing or have the Coastal Commission notice a public hearing where this issue is discussed and that there's a resolution that acknowledges that you have a place in at this table, and does the Coastal Commission? I think that's what's frustrating me.
Senator Jackson, if I could, and it's frustrating me as well.
Could we get an answer?
Discussion.
I'd like to see a commitment here at this time to sit down and resolve this.
If I say, my understanding of their process is there is no hearing part of there's no hearing requirement, nor he's had his hearings for his rule. The issue to me is they need to sit down and come to an understanding and avoid this. But please.
As I listen to the discussion here, I'm again wondering why we are here with this bill, because the issue is really between the Coastal Commission and the city of Newport Beach. And I would like to share with you that yesterday I called the city manager of Newport Beach, and I said, If the senators were to hold the bill and direct us all to sit down in a room and work this out, are you up for that? And the answer was yes, absolutely.
And respectfully, if I may, as the author,
would you like to close?
I would love to close. Thank you very much. On behalf of all Californians, I'd like to close, and I'd like to hopefully provide some clarity to these big questions that are coming up before us. And Senator Jackson, I'd love to directly address your point. This bill came to me when I was sitting in my chair, and my Capitol director came up to me and said, "Did you hear they're trying to get rid of all the beach bonfires in Southern California?" And I just kind of laughed, and I said, "You got to be kidding. Who'd want to do something like that?" And it has evolved into a big fight about air quality. But that's not where it started. Where this all started, to be very clear, is there is a very small neighborhood, a very wealthy neighborhood in Newport Beach that didn't like a lot of inlanders or people that didn't live in the area coming in, parking in their neighborhood, parking in the public parking, enjoying the beach bonfires, enjoying the beach. They just didn't like them there. And a lot of the thinking, according to much of the testimony that had been heard in many forums, was they didn't like the out-of-towners using their beach. And that's where it all started. And they tried many things, noise, nuisance violations, all these things, and eventually it morphed into an air quality issue. And the fact now that we're talking about air quality is fine. This is wonderful, because I think that's one of the great things about living in California is, as was mentioned, we don't have cigarette smoking in a lot of public places, and that's wonderful. As a reformed smoker myself, I love it. I have nice, clean lungs, I think, and I think that's something we should all aspire to. But as it relates to beach bonfires, this is an access issue. I live in Huntington Beach. I've been a Southern California native my whole life. I've lived in Huntington Beach for 20 years, and I'm a surfer. I was down on the beach all weekend this weekend. And I can tell you that...
You're supposed to say that. You were out working.
No, I was also walking precincts, but I was going to leave that out of this particular policy conference committee. But the point is this, is that when you go down to the beach, it's the great equalizer, right? Everybody comes down. And it's not like Disneyland or all of our other wonderful Southern California attractions that bring tourists from all over. They have a big entry fee sometimes at many of these attractions, and yes, they're reasonable for the value provided, et cetera. We love our attractions, but the bottom line is you come to the beach and you can park for free on most of the city streets, or maybe pay $15 in a city lot or something like that. Other than that, you come on down to the beach, you provide whatever your, whether it's charcoal or wood or whatever else, and that's it. You buy your s'mores and your hot dogs, and you get to have an activity that's enjoyed by all, whether you're a multimillionaire or you're unemployed. Doesn't matter. And they come from all California, and they love it, and they enjoy it, and that's what this is about. But now it has evolved into a discussion over air quality. And with me, that's totally fine. The difficulty that you have mentioned, which is, hey, wait a second, we got the AQMD here with the ruling. They're trying to keep our air clean. Thank you. And the Coastal Commission, they're trying to keep the beach open to all Californians so we can enjoy an irreplaceable, inexpensive, iconic California activity. Thank you. And my mother, Senator Pavley, as you well know, was also a Coastal Commissioner.
Yes, Penny.
Yes, Penny Allen. And she was chair of the California Coastal Conservancy for 12 years as well. So I grew up in a family that understands these issues, and these were my dinner table conversations. The point is this is actually our forum to have this conversation take place. And when this committee passes this bill on to the next committee, that actually ensures that these parties get to come together and have that conversation, because to date they've not had that conversation, despite my best efforts to make that conversation take place. So with all due respect to everyone here in the room, and thank you very much for the patience of everyone that's had to listen to this, and not only the patience, but I think this process is great because it brings to light all of the various issues. And this might be one of the only forums where we can actually bring the parties together and allow them to discuss this. So by moving the bill today, by moving on to the next committee, it actually ensures, as you mentioned in your previous testimony, that conversation does take place. So with that, I respectfully ask to pass AB 1102 on to the next committee so we can make sure that discussion does take place.
Thank you, Assemblymember Allen. I appreciate the close. And one thing for clarification, if the bill does move forward, will you accept all of the amendments, including those in declarations and findings?
If we'd mentioned previously, we prefer to keep the findings in. And really, just to be clear, the findings just related back to the legislation I did last year, which was when the issue first came up, I just wanted the legislature to get together and say, we want to keep our beach bonfires because we value them as a California tradition. And everyone agreed in both houses, passed unanimously out, tons of co-authors. And that's why I think that was, Ledge Council put that in the findings, that it was the intent, to keep our beach bonfires. If that is what's holding it up in committee today, I'm happy to accept that. That's fine. Just to proceed, with conversation so we can move on and make sure these parties do come to the table.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to say something, Senator? I thought.
In my absence, through at least half of the conversation, I did want to just express some concerns, and I think your close, Assemblyman, really frames and focuses the debate very clearly for us, so thank you for that. I also appreciate your taking the amendments. So, for all your reasons stated, I also have a concern with just the local control issue, that I don't know that a one-size-fits-all for California. There are different issues going on in different parts of the state. I'm authoring at least one or two bills that have to do with local issues and asking my colleagues to be respectful of what's going on in the local district. So I don't know that we need to get drawn into everything. But one of the most compelling pieces of information I heard today was from the Air Quality Management District that attendance is not down, that it seems to be working. So that raises the question, is there even a need for the bill? I will support letting the bill move for the reasons that you've just said, with confidence that things will be in good hands in the next committee. But I'd like to believe that, in fact, because I do have concern, real concern, as do you, for the air quality issues, that people will come to the beach, people will use the beach, because there is that innate desire to do so, have their fires, and use other than wood as the fuel. So it seems like that's happening now. Raises questions why we need the bill. That notwithstanding, I think that's probably where we want to get to finally. So there's access, there's respect for the health issues, and everyone can live in harmony.
Thank you, Senator Lynn. Senator Gaines?
Yes, mine was just as some of the points that were brought up by Ms. Christie in terms of the experience of a wood-burning fire. And I guess my question is, could there be a compromise position that would look at charcoal in proximity to people's homes and fire in other areas of the beach? And so I'm just throwing that out.
And Senator Gaines, absolutely, this should be part of the conversation. And this, as we just mentioned, I think this really is the value of making sure that the conversation continues by passing this bill on to the next committee, because that really ensures that we get a chance to have that conversation. And I do look forward to that, because I think the points raised were excellent points. I mean, I realize that this might have started out as an issue with a wealthy neighborhood that didn't want out-of-towners on their beach, right? Californians on their beach. But it has brought in some much larger issues, because we do have some densely populated areas. And I'm very respectful of that. And I would like to make sure that conversation does take place. So
great. Thank you.
Did you want to make a comment to this?
I was just
letting everyone.
I was just going to respond that the way you suggested, Senator, is actually what is happening with implementation today.
Let me clarify. There is not a ban of wood burning?
Relative to wood burning, there is not a ban of wood burning. You can either spread your fire pits out, or if you're more than 700 feet from the nearest residence, you can burn wood without spreading your fire pits out. If you're within the 700 feet, then you just simply need to spread them out, and you could burn wood.
Okay. Does that apply to the beaches discussed, though? Because I was told, I thought the explanation was that there wasn't 700 feet.
In the city of Newport Beach, the distance is much less than 700 feet, and they elected to require charcoal because it burns cleaner, and they thought that was preferable to spreading them out because you might impact different residents, and then they'd have a whole nother set of concerns in City Hall.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is last comment, and just that it would be a lot easier if the city of Newport Beach had a local coastal plan.
Very true. Thank you for the discussion, and thank you, and Assemblymember Allen, thank you for bringing this conversation to light, because it really highlights for me a number of things. One, certainly is the relationships between the Coastal Commission and perhaps communities around the state, and certainly with the Air District as well, and in trying to balance those and harmonize, which is a word we've been using, those conflicting and sometimes conflicting, but at the end of the day, we're working for all of California. You know, as I look at the issue, and I've been struggling, and thank you for taking the amendments, I will not be supporting the bill today. I was thinking of doing that, was looking at it, but the more I've struggled over the last few days, it has been, what is the purpose of the bill? And that has been the difficulty for me, because we've made change. Certainly the intent initially was going one direction, and that direction would have placed the Coastal Commission over air quality considerations in the valley, in the basin, or in Newport and in the areas that we're talking about. I certainly couldn't support that, because the Coastal Act clearly says air concerns are related to Air District and around the state, and so we wanted to make sure that we could come up with something that worked. But then the more we worked on it, the more we came to the conclusion that the law is, as it stands today, requires the harmonization of these agencies. It requires that the Air District comes up with a bill or a rule in this particular case, and if the city of Newport Beach decides to abide by it or doesn't abide by it, if they don't abide by that rule, then there are enforcement actions against the city that the Air District can apply. If they abide by it, but at the same time they affect the Coastal Commission by their actions and whatever they do, which sounds like, according to the Coastal Commission, that they are diminishing the experience, which I have a hard time understanding, that charcoal is diminishing the experience of a fire when I see the pictures in here. But that's their decision, and that's up to them to make that call. But if the city of Newport Beach decides to change that configuration and they feel they don't need a coastal development permit for that, and they choose not to go forward with that, which is what they may be doing at this point in time, then it's up to the Coastal Commission to enforce action on them. At the end of the day, there'll be harmony at one point or another. The sad part is that we've not given the Coastal Commission the ability to enforce these actions without taking a year-long legal effort to do that. And we need to change that here, because it's important that they have equal standing in terms of, and I know that's not a legal term, Senator Jackson, that I'm using it, but they have legal standing to at least enforce the rules that in the laws and the act as they see it. But to me, this is working. It's working fine. And if the Coastal Commission does not agree with that, then they can go after the city of Newport Beach to make changes to it. The Air District, I think, did the right thing, and I believe that in looking at the requirements of Rule 444 and the way that it has been mitigated, the air quality concerns and the PM, has been a very balanced approach to it, not losing one fire ring in the area, on the beach. So I think that, and since this is my only opportunity to vote on this bill, I don't have the privilege of Senator Pavley or Senator Jackson. If it moves forward, I'm going to have to vote no on it today because of that. I think that what we need to see is a working relationship, and frankly, the coast of California touches all of us in one form or another. But I don't want to say, and I apologize for this, Ms. Christie, but there's a pettiness that I see, and that I'm hearing from, and a lack of working closely together with the communities to protect all of us, and especially protect our coast. And do we protect the coast by, is access the real issue of charcoal versus wood? And anyone who has any familiarity with air quality knows that what can be in that wood that's being burned, regardless, unless you're taking it right off of the tree and drying it and burning it, there's something in that wood that's probably not going to be good for you to breathe at some point in time, besides the particulate. But it's what that, perhaps the the pallet that was cut up to be used on there, which is probably covered with every chemical you could think of, and that person is breathing that. So I think the intention of this bill is great, and I think you've achieved the goal. I honestly think you've achieved the goal. The goal is to allow for the fire rings, and the Air District has created the opportunity, and the city has worked closely to create that, and I, at this point, don't see the need for the bill, so I will not be supporting it. Is there a motion? Senator Jackson, we have a motion? As amended. Thank you.
Item 2, AB 1102 by Assemblymember Allen. The motion is due pass as amended and re-refer to Committee on Natural Resources and Water. Senators Hill?
No.
Hill, no. Gaines? Aye. Gaines, aye. Fuller? Hancock? Jackson? Aye. Jackson, aye. Leno? Aye. Leno, aye. Pavley? Aye. Pavley, aye. 4-1.
4-1, that bill is on call, and we'll hold the roll open until for the absent members. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Senator Hill.
Yes.
I thought certainly appropriate because you chair EQ to vote no because that you share my issues. I have to be at a meeting with the Senate Pro Tem for a while. May I come back and add on if needed?
Of course, and you do have enough votes, by the way, to get the bill out, but we'll hold the roll open. I didn't fail to mention that. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank everyone on the committee for this robust conversation, and I know that by moving it, we can have conversations. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. So